Hey, welcome to the Autopsy of Unwise Choices, a journey we're going to take into the crossroads of life and the consequences that follows. I'm your host, P.D. Ware, bringing you nearly 2 decades of experience from the deaf industry. Each episode, we will dissect the real-life stories and peel back the layers of decisions that have been leading our youth to unfortunate ends. Our mission, to illuminate the path of wiser choices for our youth. So let's embark on this journey together, because every choice tells a story. Are you ready to listen? So, ladies and gentlemen, joining me today in the mortician's chair, my mentor, Mr. Preston T. Jefferson II. He is a second-generation mortician, and he has trained me with everything that he knows about the world of mortuary science. And so I'm going to allow him to share a little bit about himself, and then we'll jump into our questions.
I appreciate the introduction. Preston, been mortician licensed since 2004. It's been quite a while. Now it's about 20 years.
20 years.
And I think that it's been a little while, and I still enjoy what I do, and hope to continue to do it for years to come.
And Preston, what made you get into mortuary service? Tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to be a student of mortuary science.
Well, just like you said, my parents have owned a funeral home since the 80s. So we've been in business about 40 something years, and just growing up and then, seeing, how my parents, service the community, and, how important funeral service is, getting that last look and experience with families as they, say goodbye to loved ones. Kind of inspired me to want to do the same thing and get interested in it. And so after I went to school for a little bit up in Tennessee State University, I came back home and went to Northwest, and it's been going on ever since. And so, I kind of want to be able to do the same things they were able to do and provide that same service to the community that we still service today.
Awesome. Now, one of the reasons that I created the podcast and the reason that we're starting season 1 in the mortician's chair, because this is where my journey with death began. And I know when I first got into mortuary science, the landscape, as I like to call it, were what we're seeing now are unprecedented times with all of the gun violence that we're seeing, and especially the amount of gun violence that's taking place in our city, where we've lost so many of our young people due to gun violence. And for those that don't know, in 2022, gun violence became the leading cause of death for children and teens in the United States of America. And so, Preston, if you would kind of share when you first got into the industry, what the landscape was like as far as having to prepare so many young people. Was it like that when you first got into the industry, as opposed to how it is now with the amount of youth that we've lost due to violence?
I have to say no. It wasn't like that when I first got into it. I mean, at the time, at the risk of sounding we're older, but there was a time you used to go to funeral service. It was all, that older generation. And every now and again, you may go to a younger person's funeral service, but it was kind of few and far in between. Now it's becoming, more prevalent, to have younger services for younger people, and, contributing factor to that being violence and trauma that takes place because of, the environment that they're in and the situations that they were to get there. So, it's becoming a lot more regular that you see these things, unfortunately.
And one of the things that I've shared in some of the speaking engagements that I've had is that death seems to have become so commonplace amongst our families, and that's a painful thing to say. And I tell people, we see the rest in peace And the one thing that I say about that is that there is rest in death, but there is no peace in the manner in which our kids are leaving out of here, seeing so much potential being buried, and kids not even being around long enough to realize, what their mission is, what their purpose is in life. And I just don't believe that our kids were put here to leave so soon. And so one of the things I would ask you as a mortician is if you can kind of share, and we won't talk about specific cases, but just kind of some of the injuries that you've seen as it relates to violence among young people. Like, what have you had to deal with in the prep room?
Every you deal with GSWs, knife wounds or bladed weapon wounds, things of that nature, and you have to go and make those repaired to get, people's loved ones to a place where they can be viewed. And like you said, it's just trying to get comfort level. Family have a final look and maybe some, if that's the most appropriate word, maybe just some closure with not having to see that traumatic injury. So those are the things that we deal with.
No. And that's one of the things that I'm not sure that a lot of people understand, the magnitude, not only of what our families that are losing their kids, that have lost their kids, are going through, and just preparing for that final viewing, as we call it. And so the mortician having to have the skill set, and it's definitely an art to mortuary science, and taking your time, and the skills that you develop over the years, and being able to prepare the kids for those families and their final viewing. What has that been like for you mentally and emotionally?
Uh, it's definitely not something I know we well, you get to it one day, it'll just kind of be, like second nature, but you really don't get used to seeing, that type of thing with families and people grieving and heartache. You are able to function professionally because you know that at that time of need that the family needs someone to be able to do that. But it doesn't really get easier. It still has an effect on you, so you empathize with people in that respect. But yeah, some days it's a little, in certain situations, depending on the age, of course, with dealing with younger, it's sad altogether, but it can kind of get next to you. But it's the other part of it is kind of being faith-based. You have to understand what the way I was raised, in the church, is that, if the spirit is not in the body, then that presence is somewhere else, so you have to take comfort in that, and then still be able to function in a professional way to service the family. So I guess in a nutshell, it doesn't get any easier, but you just still have to push on, and then, pray about it.
Okay. Do you, outside of the work that you do, like, what are some of the things that you do to make sure that you are emotionally, physically, and mentally at a high capacity so that you can do what you do on a consistent basis?
One of the biggest things you can do is just, pray, meditate, still yourself, make sure that you mentally prepared, however you need, whether it's, reading some, Bible verses, or maybe it's, like I said, just stop, taking a couple of deep breaths before you go in to service families, and just having that experience and knowing what you are going, or you could possibly encounter doing those services, so that you maintain that perfection.
Awesome, awesome. And one of the things too, Preston, that we want to do with this podcast is to offer words of encouragement for our youth. If you could offer some words or nuggets, so to speak, to our youth in our city, and not just in our city, but those that will potentially hear this podcast, what words of wisdom would you instill in them with what you've seen in your career as a mortician?
I'd have to say maybe stop, you know, focusing so much on, how you look, say something. So you remember how they used to have that saying, if you see something, say something, not necessarily, having a like a snitching mind like that, but just making it aware, hey, if you want to keep, your community a little safer, not saying you necessarily go tell somebody to be detrimental to, but maybe you say something to community leaders where they kind of come guide younger people that they have a closer relationship, and maybe they can kind of steer them towards the better result as opposed to telling somebody and all they think about is the punishment angle. Maybe kind of talk with the community leaders or people that in the community that they look up to, so they can inspire the youth to do something better and not just want to do continue to do the things that's going to get them into those situations of a violent or traumatic death.
Okay, that's a great nugget. And Preston, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on and share your experiences in the field of mortuary science, and for be willing to sit in the mortician's chair. And we definitely will have you back on the podcast in the near future to share some more nuggets and some more insights. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we let our audience know, that if this message is powerful to you, please subscribe to the podcast and share it across all of your social media platforms. You can follow us on the website at the autopsy of unwisechoices.com. You can send in some comments, recommendations for some topics that you may like to see on the podcast. And again, Preston, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you joining us today on the Autopsy of Unwise Choices.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much for joining the Autopsy of Unwise Choices, where today's stories are more than just cautionary tales. They're beacons guiding our youth towards better decisions. And remember, the choices that they make today shape their tomorrows. So if today's episode moved you in any way, then share it with someone who needs to hear these lessons. Follow us at pdwhereinspires.com to check out the weekly blog, book speaking engagements, and check out dates for upcoming live events. And remember, until next time, encourage our youth to make choices that pave the way for brighter futures.